Hi everyone, welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith. In this video, we're going to learn the 1 to 4 player game, Xenoshyft by Cool Mini or Not. Mining planets for Xenosathem fuel has been Nortech's line of work for over 100 years. And fending off the local alien inhabitants addicted and mutated by exposure to that fuel is just part of everyday business. It's a dangerous part because those aliens want to rip and shred their way through everything, including you. So players will have to work together to fend off waves of these aliens long enough so Nortech can complete its mission and then you can all safely evacuate. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. Xenoshyft was originally released on Kickstarter with some different components, but in this video, you're going to see the game exactly as if you purchased it today. To set up, lay out the wave and item dashboards. For each of the images shown on the wave board, there are stacks of matching cards, which you need to find and then place on the board in the indicated positions. The box insert provides slots to separate similar types of cards, which will make the setup much easier. Now each player collects a red hive and blue Nortech lane, placing them together like this. I'll be setting up a 2-player game in this video. Also give each player 4 militia and 6 value 1 Xenosathem. Each player will represent one of these divisions that make up the Nortech base you're defending. So shuffle and deal out 1 to each player randomly, returning the rest to the box. Along with the militia and Xenosathem that each player already collected, their division will indicate 2 bonus items that they will also begin the game with. There are 24 different items included in the game, each represented by one of these placeholders. Find the one matching the bonus item indicated on your division and place them on the item dashboard. Then find the matching stacks of those cards and place them on top. Now each player should collect their bonuses. For example, the Science Lab player is told they can collect 2 high-X grenades. These should be added to the cards the player already collected and then shuffled together and placed into a face-down deck beside their lane. Shuffle the remaining item placeholders and then deal enough face up onto the item dashboard so the remaining spots are filled. Then find the matching items and place them on the appropriate stacks. These are the enemy hive decks, and you can sort them by their backs into wave 1, 2, and 3 decks. If you fan through these decks, you will find 2 boss enemies in each one, and these are indicated by the symbol here in the top right-hand corner. If you're playing a 1 or 2 player game, randomly choose one of them and shuffle it into the deck and return the other one to the box. In a 3 or 4 player game, keep all of the bosses in each deck. In this case, we only have 2 players, so we'll remove this one. This tracker shows the health of the base, and you will add 15 points for each player. So in this case, we'll start with a health of 30. These are the ability and damage tokens. Choose one of them to help keep track of the current round, which will begin at 1. And that's the setup. In Xenoshyft, your goal isn't to wipe out the alien threat, it's to outlast it. If you can survive for 9 rounds of play and keep the base's health from ever going to 0, then you'll win. Each round is broken into 5 phases, starting with the first one, the draw phase. Here, all players will draw from their personal decks until they have 6 cards in hand. So in future rounds, if you had some cards left over, then you would only draw as many as required to bring your hand total back up to 6. During the game, cards from your hand that you've played may end up in a discard pile, and over time, this discard pile will fill up. So on a future draw phase, you may have less than 6 cards to draw. Draw as many as you can, in this case 4, then shuffle up your discard pile and create a new draw pile from it, taking the remaining cards that you need. Next is the acquire resources phase. During each round of wave 1, this will begin with each player collecting a free value 1 Xenosathem fuel card, which they'll add to their hand. In the rounds of wave 2, each player instead collects a value 3 Xenosathem, and in rounds 7 through 9, they will collect a value 6. You can think of Xenosathem as the money you have to spend in the game, and each one will provide you with a certain value. At the beginning of the game, players will at most have value 1 Xenosathem in their hand, and now they can discard as much as they want to gain that much in buying power for purchasing troops and items. In this case, I'm going to have 4 to spend. Anything I don't spend will be lost. This phase, like the previous one, has no strict turn order. That means that all of the players can be spending their Xenosathem and buying items in any order they want. But you may want to stop and discuss your plans for the turn ahead to help assess what each player really needs to have. Remember, this is a cooperative game. You will win and lose together. The cost to purchase a troop or an item is shown in the top right-hand corner. And you can buy as many of any item that you want as long as you can afford it. Eventually, it is possible to deplete the stack. You'll know this because you'll get down to the placeholder card. At that point, you will not be able to buy more of that item. Do note, some troops specify they will not be available for purchase until later waves. For example, these state that they cannot be purchased until Wave 2 or higher. And these troops are only available during the 3 rounds of the final wave. Now this is easy to remember because of how things are laid out. You'll notice here, during rounds 1, 2, and 3 of Wave 1, you'll be able to buy the items in that row. And then during Wave 2, you'll unlock all of these troops to buy as well as the previous ones. And in the final wave, everything becomes available for purchase. There are a couple of exceptions. First of all, you don't directly buy Xenosathem. We'll see how you can acquire more a little bit later. And you also can't purchase militia. Remember, you begin the game with 4 of these in your deck. This symbol here means they have no purchasing cost, so they can't be bought. You could even remove this deck from the table if you wanted to, as long as no one has the Barracks Division, which has a special ability that allows you to collect militia, as opposed to purchasing it. Anything you purchase will go directly into your hand, so it will be immediately available for you to use. You may remember I discarded 4 Xenosathem, so I'm going to purchase this Ranger, which costs 2, and this HPS Rescue Armor, which also costs 2. I already made the purchases for the other player. Now you move on to the deployment phase. Here, all of the players will choose troops from their hand to deploy into the blue spaces of the Nortec lanes. No single space can contain more than 1 troop. And no lane can have more than 4 troops at a time. You also can't have any spaces on this side of the lane or between the troops, so I'll slide these over like this. I actually have 1 more militia that I could deploy, but I'm going to hang on to it for now and I'll show you why in just a moment. The other player's not so fortunate. They only have 2 troops and both of them are lowly, weak militia. This phase, like the previous ones, is also completed simultaneously, but once again, you're going to want to talk to the other players because every lane is going to be attacked by aliens. And if one of the lanes is looking weak, you may be able to help out. Because when you deploy troops, you don't have to just put them in your own lane. You can put them in someone else's if they're willing. And right now I can see my friend here has only 2 weak militia. I only have 2 troops as well, but at least one of them's a ranger. So I might offer and say, hey, do you want this militia? And if they agree, they can then take it and put it directly into their lane. Now this is important. You cannot give someone a troop to put into their hand. It has to go directly into one of the lanes. During this phase, you can also equip troops in any lane with equipment that you've purchased. Now you do this by slipping it underneath of the chosen troop. You'll want to keep the ability text and any other bonuses on the bottom exposed because that will be applicable during the gameplay. Again, you can deploy your own equipment to another player's troop. Just remember, when you do that, it has to go directly into their lane. They have to agree to it, and once placed, it becomes theirs. So again, if this unit is discarded, this armor will go with it into the discard pile of that other player. At the bottom of each item, you'll find a variety of symbols that give you an idea of the kind of equipment that it is, and sometimes there'll be multiple symbols on a single item. You'll find technology, instance, medical, equipment, armor, and weapons. I point this out because a single troop can at most have only 1 weapon and 1 armor equipped at a time. In future deployment phases, you may find you already have troops in your lane, ones that survived from a previous round. If so, you cannot choose to discard them or shift them into somebody else's lane, even if they're clogging up valuable spaces that you'd like to give to better troops that you've recruited. Once placed in a lane, the troop will stay there until defeated. That said, At the end of the deployment phase, before moving on to the next one, each player may now rearrange all the troops within their own lane, including switching up where the equipment is placed. Now players are dealt one card into each of the 4 spaces of their hive lane, and these will come from the current wave deck that they're facing. At the beginning of the game, this will be Wave 1. Starting from round 4 and on, you will draw from Wave 2 until you get to round 7. Then you'll draw from Wave 3. If you run out of enemies to deal, then find the discard pile for that wave, reshuffle it, and then continue dealing. Next is the combat phase. Choose a player to go first. They will face every enemy in their lane. Then the next player in clockwise order will do the same for their lane, and so it continues until every player has had a chance to go. In future rounds, the first player will be the player seated to the left of the previous first player. Combat is broken into steps, starting with the reveal. Flip over the enemy in the lane farthest to the right, or if you want to think of it differently, closest to the center. Now resolve any reveal effects that it might have. In this case, we're told to place this enemy at the end of the enemy line. How hard can this be if all the enemies just keep running to the back of the line? Maybe I should have kept reading the text. It says here, while in lane, reduce the damage all enemies suffer by 1. That's not so good after all. We'll see how this impacts things a little bit later. Well, in that case, our combat got cut short. So we're going back to the start of the line, and now we're going to have a new reveal phase with this enemy. And this one does not have a reveal effect. After resolving any reveal effect that might be there, you then move on to the reaction step. Now all of the players have the opportunity to use special abilities on their troops or to play instants from their hands to help the current player in this fight. Only items with the red instant symbol can be played from your hand during combat. For example, you can't decide at this point to deploy a ranger into the lane. It doesn't have an instant symbol. Now, that said, there are some exceptions. For example, this paratrooper says in its card text, you may deploy this troop anytime you'd be able to play an instant. In all cases, the card text supersedes the rules of the game. It should be noted you can't use an instant in response to a reveal effect. For example, this panic spider says, deal 2 damage to the first troop in lane, and then move that troop to the end of the lane. So an instant could not be played in response to this, unless the instant specifically says otherwise. For example, the med kit says this card may be played in response to a reveal effect. So going back to our example, we revealed the enemy in this position. If there had been a reveal effect, we would have resolved that. Next, all of the players had an opportunity to react, and none of the players chose to do so, which means it's now the fight step. Unless a card effect says otherwise, it's the combatants in these positions that will be resolving the fight, the ones closest to the center. Damage is now assigned simultaneously between the 2 combatants based on the power level of the opponents, which is this red value here. So the leech is going to do 1 damage to the ranger. Don't forget to add in any values that comes from attached equipment. For example, the ranger by default has 2 power, but is getting another 1 power from the weapon that we attached during the deployment phase. So we would do 3 damage to the leech, but remember, the shield swarm is sitting at the back of the lane, and it is reducing the damage done to enemies by 1. So we're only going to place 2 damage on the leech. If the total number of damage tokens on a card is equal to or greater than its hit points, which is the green value here, then that unit has been destroyed. It and any equipped cards are placed in their owner's discard pile. When an alien is destroyed, just put it in a face-up discard pile beside the current wave. Armor equipment will usually give you a special effect, but also bonus hit points. So don't forget that you may be able to take more damage than what is showing on your troop when you're counting up to see if it's been destroyed. If neither troop or alien are killed, repeat the fight steps, ignoring, of course, the reveal step since this alien has already been revealed. Players can choose to use instants or otherwise just resolve the damage again, in which case our ranger takes 1 more hit and the leech takes 2. Always be sure to read any of the special abilities on the enemies or the troops and their equipment because that may have an impact on the outcome as well. In this case, the leech has been defeated, so we will remove it from the lane and put it in the discard pile. Our ranger is hanging in there for now. As soon as a unit is destroyed, you move on to the advancement step, where you push units in the lanes towards the centers to fill in any empty spaces there. So in this case, the hive enemies would move forward like so. Now you repeat the combat steps again for the units on the front lines, starting with the reveal step. You will continue resolving these fights until either all of the enemies or all of the troops or everything has been wiped out of a player's lane. Now, if you destroyed all of the enemies in your lane, that's good. They're not going to be able to do any damage to the base. And then you'll proceed on to the next player's turn. But let's go and see what happens if all of your troops are destroyed and there's still some enemies left behind. So our poor ranger and militia unit were shredded, and now we have these two enemies left alive in the lane. The first one will do its power level and damage directly to the base. Now, players can still play instance, if possible, to try to destroy the enemy, preventing its damage from happening. So now my partner at the table decides to throw his high X grenade into the fight, which will do 3 damage. And remember, this is still in the lane, so it prevents 1 damage, but 2 damage is enough to defeat this unit. So it will be removed from the lane and not do its damage to the base. This enemy will then advance, and it would do 1 damage. We have nothing to prevent that, so we'll subtract 1 from the health of our base. Only 1 point was lost. That's not too bad, but that's just 1 lane. If the health of the base reaches 0, then we immediately lose. Otherwise, we're now going to go to the next player in clockwise order and fight all of the aliens in their lane. For the purposes of this video, we're going to skip ahead a little bit, and we'll say that my partner did just fine. She defeated all of the aliens in her lane and still has a militia left over. Now, and again, assuming that the base was not destroyed, you'll move on to the wrap-up phase. Here, each player can discard as many cards as they want from their hand, and you might do this in order to be able to draw more cards during the next round. Remember, you're going to draw back up to 6. So any cards you have in your hand will reduce how many that you draw. And if you think, well, this one I don't think is going to help me that much next round, you might choose to get rid of it. Then players can also rearrange the troops and equipment within their own lane. But your troops don't automatically heal. And as I said, you can't get rid of them, and you can't shift them over to somebody else's lane. Now we'll check to see if any of the item stacks were depleted, and you can tell because the placeholder card will now be visible. Now, it's unlikely this will happen after the first round of the game, so I've created this situation to show you how it works. First, remove the placeholder cards for those stacks. Then draw 2 new ones and fill them into those spaces. And find the matching stacks to put on top. In this way, you'll always have a full complement of items to choose from when you go into a new round. Now advance the round tracker. As you go through the game, this could cause you to enter a new wave. As soon as that happens, remove the hive deck of the previous wave, and now you'll be drawing from the new wave when filling up the enemy lanes. The same will happen again when you start the 3rd wave. If you complete the 9th wave, and the base has at least 1 point of health left, Nortech has completed its mission on the planet, and the players have won. And that's how you play Xenoshyft. Now, you've probably noticed there's a lot of cards in this game, and they all have their own special abilities. I am not going to try to cover all of those in this video. Instead, I would recommend you go to the Cool Mini or Not website if you have any specific questions. But there are some extra rules I'd like to go over right now to help get you on your way. First, you'll remember during the setup that each player was dealt a division, and along with giving them a couple of bonus items, it also provides them with unique special abilities that they can use. During Wave 1, the weapons researcher, for example, has access to this ability, and it says that once per round, they can reduce the cost of a weapon item by 1 to a minimum of 1. And once again, you can collaborate. So you could give this discount to another player at the table who maybe has less Xenosathem to spend this round. Once you reach Wave 2, you'll then be able to use both your Wave 1 and Wave 2 abilities, and in Wave 3, all of them will be unlocked for you to use. Some abilities on troops or equipment will state that they can only be used once per round. In those cases, after using them, place a blue token there as a reminder not to use them again. At the end of the round, remove all those markers. Remember I said you can never have more than 4 troops in a lane at one time? Well, due to certain effects, you may be required to add more than 4 enemies to a lane, in which case you just keep placing them. Sometimes, instead of discarding, you're told to burn a card. For example, if we were told to burn this troop, we would place it back in its original stack. Any equipment that was attached to it will go to your discard pile, unless otherwise stated. Xenosathem is great, but as the game goes on, you're going to be collecting the better valued Xenosathem fuel, and these earlier ones are just going to clog up your hand. Here I have my discard pile fanned out, and at any time during the round, I can follow these instructions. On the value 1 Xenosathem, it says that I can burn 3 value 1 Xenosathem from my discard pile to gain a single 3 valued one instead, which will go directly to my discard pile as well. But this is good because I've reduced the odds that I'm going to draw these lower valued Xenosathem and now have a chance to draw a much better one. Just remember, you can only trade in Xenosathem that is currently in your discard pile, not from your hand. You'll notice this value 3 Xenosathem has its own burn text that says you can burn 2 of these to gain a 6 value Xenosathem. Sometimes you can target a face-down enemy with damage. For example, if we played this high-X grenade, it says we can deal 3 damage to 1 enemy. It doesn't say which enemy in the lane it has to be, so we could target this one. But first, we have to flip it face up and resolve its reveal effect. Even if the damage we're about to do would be enough to defeat it outright, we still have to resolve this effect, which says to deal the first troop in the lane 3 damage. Then, because we've defeated this enemy, we can remove it. Finally, if you have effects from multiple enemies that would resolve at the same time, then players can choose the order in which to resolve them. And the same goes for troops, if you have several of them resolving at once. Well, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. And I hope you'll subscribe and stick around, because in future episodes, we're going to do a playthrough of Xenoshyft so you can see the game in action. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.